Well, namaskar everyone. We'll have a very popular session today. Most of you must be waiting to know about your karma and our karma and his karma. Well, at least today's karma is that you have to be with me for 1 hour, listening to this talk, good or bad. You see, yesterday, when we talked about the mystery of rebirth, I had quoted one verse from chapter 8, verse number 16. The highest heavens of the cosmic plan are subject to a return to rebirth. But O Kaunteya, there is no rebirth imposed on the soul that comes to me. So you see, the question is not imposed on those who come to him or those who really have been constantly thinking about the Lord. It's not imposed. But what does it imply? That for those of us who are busy thinking of ourselves, obviously there is no choice. We have to take a rebirth. You may be aspiring for it, wanting it, but the conditions are very stiff. As Lord Krishna tells us here, he who constantly remembers me, thinking of none else, the yogin, O Partha, who is in constant union with me, finds me easy to attain. So these persons or those persons who are in constant union with him, that there is no rebirth for them. But unfortunately, this idea of wanting no rebirth has been quite a deep wish with many Indians. Everyone wants to go to that stage when there is no more rebirth. It has become a prevalent idea in our country. The sole aim of liberation is to secure for the individual soul freedom from physical rebirth. Well, that aspiration is there because we are all tired of this suffering and pain and sorrow and all that. So we say, let us escape. It's easier said than done. Escape route is not so easy. But however, most of our yogis and sannyasins, they have preached to the common man that let us have this aspiration for non-birth, non-rebirth. Well, how many have attained that is a question. But then the important thing is, the desire of personal salvation, says Sri Aurobindo, however high its form, is an outcome of ego. You see, even this wanting to be having non-rebirth is nothing but pure individual ego. Because it rests on the idea of our own individuality and its desire for its personal good or welfare, its longing for a release from suffering or its cry for the extinction of the trouble of becoming, and makes that supreme aim of our existence. But this is a very wrong ideal that has been given to us, I would say, in the last, from about 9th, 10th centuries onwards. So some of you may know why I am saying the 9th, 10th centuries. Because after that, the philosophy of illusionism came in India. It took hold of our mind. And we said the world is an illusion, let's forget about it. Before that, somebody said the world is a pain and suffering, let's quit it. So all the time this negative philosophy is completely took hold of our mind, and we said that's the highest spiritual aspiration. But that has been one tendency of the common people. But there have been cases, and especially the person who taught nirvana, he himself says that he turned away when his spirit was on the threshold of nirvana and took the vow never to cross it while a single being remained in the sorrow and ignorance. That's what is very beautiful about Buddha. You see, he taught us, he preached nirvana. But when he himself was on the corridors, on the doorstep of nirvana, he turned back to earth. He said, as long as there is a single being remain in the sorrow and the ignorance, I will not take nirvana. So that is the true spiritual person, I would say. All those other spiritual persons who have sought a liberation and nirvana are not the type of this Amitabha Buddha. In fact, in our own recent times, we have Swami Vivekananda telling us, I have lost all wish for my salvation. May I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries, so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe. That, in fact, in the Aurobindonian language and light, I would say that is the true spiritual person who seeks for the liberation, salvation of whole humanity. You see, this is also the case with, we have heard about that. Sri Ramakrishna also, when he was on his deathbed, he also said that I will come back 33,000 times if required, but to see that humanity comes out of this suffering. So that is the real positive aspiration of Indian philosophy. Not a release, not a personal salvation, not to run away from this battle. So it's all great minds and great souls have always sought the liberation of humanity. And now we have heard about Sri Aurobindo himself, who stands only for humanity and not for personal liberation. In fact, in a letter or so, he seems to have said that if it was only for myself to attain Supermind, I would have done it long back. If it was just an individual effort to attain the Supermind, he says, I would have done it long back. But he wants to take humanity with him. That's why the time required and the preparation was required delayed it. So this is the question of rebirth. But when we speak about rebirth, as I said yesterday, there are two elements in that. One is this question of salvation. The other is the question of karma. Because rebirth does mean that we are here to work out our karma, as it is said. So that is the question of karma that I will be concentrating upon today. How far is this theory of karma also true? And I would say, what is the truth of the theory of karma? There are actually two things that I am going to deal with. One is the law of karma, as it is normally understood, and the other is the karma as fate or destiny or whatever, predetermination. So karma as destiny and the law of karma, they are two different things. So we will look into both. So normally, when we speak about karma as the law of karma, what we are given to understand since generations is the nature of the soul's reincarnation will depend upon the sum of his past actions or karma. If he was virtuous, he would be born in the higher forms and his life would be one long story of happiness and joy. And if he were wicked or sinful or guilty or impious conduct, he would be born in a life of suffering and misery. A very simple equation. Nature is said to be an impartial accountant, and if our past actions were of a mixed character, that is to say, partially good and partly evil, then the fruits of our past actions shall also be mixed. That is to say, in the next life we shall have the rarest good luck and the severest ill fortune. Such is the inexorable karmic law, which metes out punishment and reward with the strictest impartiality. For this law is an arithmetician with his abacus as well as a judge with his code of penalties for long past crimes and misdemeanors. So this is the thing that we have all been given to understand. Law of karma is nothing but reward and punishment. If you are good, you get rewarded. If you are bad, you get the punishment. This has been there, even every child has been given this understanding. But then there's further to this. We say that sometimes it happens that the results or reactions are not visible on the surface in this life. You see, it has been also added very cleverly, I must say, that if you do not get your reward or punishment in this life, you will get them in the next life. And besides, man's action may produce results which may affect not merely the individual but also many others. That's the third point. You see, your karma is different, but also you may be influencing others' karma also. So that is why it was said, take care what you are doing, because not only you are dragging your own karma, but you are taking others with you. And this is the normal, in short, man's past actions or karma must determine not only his future birth, but also the level and the nature of his next formation. So these are 3 or 4 points. You can elaborate on that. You can have a lot of examples, But this is the normal philosophy. Now we have to see how far is this true. What is the criticism that Sri brings in? And of course, as you must have seen all this while in the last 5-6 days, I've drawn all my readings, conclusions, only from Sri, and mostly from the Life Divine and from essays on the Gita. Because this is the only book which really deals with all the problems of humanity, past, present and future. So it's in the same book, the Life Divine, that he has a chapter called Rebirth and Other Worlds, where he says about this question of reward and punishment. A very simple logical answer. He says, we have also to notice in this connection means reward and punishment, that according to this conception, there is a system of a double punishment and double reward for the same karma. A very interesting point. That is to say, a sinner is first punished in hell. We have all been told if you do something wrong, you go to Patala, you go to hell. So first we are punished, whoever goes there in hell, for his sins committed in his previous life, and thereafter he has again to pay for the same sinful acts by lifelong suffering and unhappiness in the next birth. The Sri says, how logical is it? You once suffer in hell and come back again and suffer on earth. What is this judgment? Is it rational? Is it really divine in that? He says, no, same thing. Virtuous person is rewarded in heaven for his piety and again blessed with all the joy and happiness. In short, all the best that life can offer in the next terrestrial existence. So what Sri Aurobindo calls the double reward and double punishment is illogical. That's the first criticism he gives. Then he says, what we have said about good actions must produce good results and evil actions must produce evil results. So this is the first argument, but second argument that Sri Aurobindo brings in is that as it is contended or believed that there is such a thing as cosmic justice that strictly controls the actions and reactions of nature's energies in life, we should presume that although not always visible in every incident of life, justice must be the rule and it must be evident in the totality of nature's dealings with us. Well, the point that Sri Aurobindo is driving at is, you see, whenever we said when you have done wrong action, bad action, you have to take a punishment. But then Sri Aurobindo is saying, if it is questioned, why do good and evil deeds alone, good and evil thoughts too should produce their corresponding results? It may be said that man should not be held responsible for his thoughts, which unlike his deeds are more or less involuntary and happened in spite of himself. Hence it is held that it is deeds alone that make or mar his future progress. Have we ever come into this picture that even your thoughts can have a wrong ideal? Even your wrong thoughts must be punishable. Why not? Why is it only my physical actions? If I beat somebody, if I kill somebody, if I steal something, but what about my ill thinking and ill feeling, wrong feeling, jealous feeling, all the dirty feeling that we have the lower emotion, the anger and everything? Why shouldn't they also be punished? That's Sri Aurobindo's argument. Why are you taking only punishment and reward only for the external physical action? That's the second argument that he has given. Of course, he has many of them, but I am just bringing out the salient ones. And then here we have, now Sri Aurobindo would bring out the real thing, the real explanation of karma. But in this again we have Lord Krishna telling us, chapter 18, verse number 60, what from delusion thou desirest not to do, O Kaunteya, that helplessly thou shalt do, bound by thy own work, born of thy svabhava. Chapter 18, verse number 61. The Lord, O Arjuna, is seated in the heart of all beings, turning all beings mounted upon a machine by his Maya. That is the truth of karma. What is it? He says, the Lord is seated in the heart of all beings, turning all beings mounted upon a machine by his Maya. What does it imply? Sri Aurobindo gives an explanation. He says, if the cosmos was strictly mechanical in character, moved by strictly mechanical process, in other words, if everything in the world were only law and process without any framer of the law, without any divine being and will behind the movement, then of course the foregoing description of the whole law of karma would be acceptable. This is the argument that Lord Krishna has given the same thing, but I am elaborating that from Sri Aurobindo, saying that why do we think that there is only this mechanical law? Because in our understanding, in our philosophy, that law is something good, but behind the law, there is, as Sri Krishna said, there is the question of the Lord is seated in the heart of all. So there is a divine being behind the law. So don't think that law is acting in its own manner independent of the divine being. Obviously, that's the most important thing, that there is some greater consciousness. As Sri Krishna says, the Lord is there, as Sri Aurobindo is telling us, the divine being and will are there. So never forget, never separate that the divine being is separate and the law is separate and the law is acting independently. It cannot be. So what all we have to remember is that law is in its own place, but behind law there is a greater being. Just as Sri Krishna also tells us when we do the action, that you may do the actions with attachment or without attachment or anything, but when he's saying do not be attached to action, because the actions are done actually by nature and by your svabhava and by your guna. So why are we thinking that I am doing the action? I am not the doer. In ignorance, out of ego, for a long while, for many years, we may say I am the doer. But when life brings in its own suffering and sorrow and thrashing, what is it meant for? To make you realize that you are not the doer. Please realize that someone else is the doer. So that, in fact, in all of spiritual philosophy, everyone says what is the role of pain and suffering? It's majorly this, not the only, but majorly this. Because you see, from an Aurobindonian point of view, from the Gita point of view, this entire life is meant for a spiritual growth, which I have talked about yesterday. The outer events are there, they are progressing. But the inner being also has to progress. And all that comes in our way, good or bad, suffering and pain and reward and all that, is meant to make us realize that I am not the doer. That means the ego is the bar, ego was the helper, ego is the bar. Now we have to say remove the ego. So the sooner we realize that there is someone else, that is nature. But also nature is not just a law. Behind nature there is the Purushottama, there is the divine, there is Purusha. So the same law is there. Sri Aurobindo also is telling us the same thing, that behind this karmic law there is this divine personality. So he says, but there is not only a cosmos but a cosmic being. Man is not merely a physical, vital, mental formation. There is a soul behind it which passes through repeated births and chooses its own outward formation according to a divine plan. Let's try to understand these links. Okay, we have the divine, the supreme, the Purushottama, the Purusha and all that. But close within us, we have the same divine being representing in us as the Atman or the psychic being or whatever we are given it the name. And to whom does this body belong? It does not belong to my ego or my mind or my vital or my physical. This body, mind and life are nothing but instrumentation for the person who is ruling within us, the Atman. So don't you think that this Atman has any sense, has any direction, has any aim? Do you think that everything is being done by this Prakriti, of the whatever we want to do? My mind thinks, my ambition, my emotions, my physical? No, there is the true doer is behind, invisible, impalpable. And unfortunately, we don't even recognize him for most of the time. But now that we know a bit of philosophy, we know that there is the element of the psychic being. And this psychic being is the true doer. And that this psychic being as the true doer is connected with the Paramatman. But as of now, the psychic being for a while gets lost in Prakriti. Why is it gets lost? Because the soul also, the psychic being also evolves, awakens, as we say. In the beginning of the growth of the human being, the psychic being is identified with the body. That's why you see the teenager all the time thinks of the body, my most beautiful body. You look into the mirror, he is the handsomest person there upon earth. Because that is the identity of the inner being, the Purusha itself identifying with the body. That's why there is a strong confidence in body, because there is also the sanction of the Purusha there. But as one grows up, there is the Purusha identifying with the vital, our emotions, our relations, and all that. Because that identification is not just Prakriti and emotion, and you have a spouse, you have children, you have family. No. There is a growth within the awakening of the psychic being, also identifies with this outer being of the vital. There comes a point, but then most people get stuck there, but the psychic being, in some people, grows up and says, I am the mind. That's why you'll see in everybody's life, there's a point where the mind becomes brilliant. It starts opening up. It receives ideas, it has wonderful plans, it's creative, it's artistic, it is everything. Suddenly there's a kind of a bursting of a creativity in any field. It's not just art, and it could be computer or business or anything. But you feel the energy of the mind. But unfortunately, again, we get lost there. But there is the point of spiritual turning. Those of us, not the soul, is wanting to go to the next level. The psychic being says, I'm not just a mind. I'm somebody else. I belong to the divine. I'd come for a different purpose. So if after this mental growth, if we can turn to that spiritual turn in life, that means seeking for a being, for a personality, for a consciousness, for an existence beyond the mind, that is the beginning of your recognition that there is a spirit behind. And once you start recognizing the spirit behind, there begins the first introduction to spiritual life. Because up until then, you are a mind, you are a vital, you are a body. But then the soul says, I want to go beyond the mind. So that is how Aurobindo is telling us that we recognize in this karmic law also, there is a question of the divine being, the cosmic being. So one side there is the cosmic being, the other side there is the psychic being within us, who are partners in this evolution of consciousness. So that is the explanation given to what I read from the Bhagavad Gita, that verse number. Now the question is, can karma be changed? Now this is something that people have asked, and the question is, now and then when we come across what may be called caprices of destiny, that is to say, instances where a man having continued good luck and prosperity without any effort to his part, to deserve it, and another man in constant want and poverty throughout his life, in spite of his best efforts to be affluent circumstances. These are common questions, that why this bad person is enjoying the welfare and the comfort and all this of this life, and then how a good person is suffering. These are the contrasts in life. Now this is something that's a very tricky question, but we need to understand that there is something beyond all this. That is to say, this world is not moving around its axis with the sole object of catering to the material needs of humanity. This is the new thing that we should understand. You see, karma, we have only connected with the material needs of humanity, the poverty, the position, the wealth, the comfort and all that. But then Aurobindo comes out very strongly. This world is not moving around its axis with the sole object of catering to the material needs of humanity. Nor is superficial happiness or worldly success the aim of earthly existence. The only quest of the soul on this earth is its growth as it passes through repeated births. So this is a new dimension we should bring into our understanding. That karma, we always think of only a material growth or a material prosperity. But Sri Aurobindo is rejecting this mundane, ordinary thinking. In fact, he says, no. The soul, the whole purpose of the quest of the soul is to have a kind of have a spiritual growth. The soul chooses in each birth whatever stimulates its growth. Now, please see this line. The soul chooses in each birth whatever stimulates its growth, whether it is joy or sorrow, wealth or poverty, happiness or anguish. The soul may reject affluence and accept poverty if it helps its spiritual effort for the time being. For each and every one of the aforesaid experiences may be a step in the furtherance of the soul's ultimate objective, namely complete self-unfolding in material nature. This is the most crucial point that we have to understand. Let us forget that our rebirth is only meant for the material needs, for the material comforts, for the material growth. That's the commonest misunderstanding we have. Because the only true understanding is that the soul takes birth only for the sake of a spiritual growth. So for that, as he has enumerated very beautifully, it can have this joy or sorrow. You see, it can choose a life of sorrow. It can go to some parentage or some environment where there is nothing but sorrow. It may have chosen willfully. And it may have chosen wealth or poverty. So let us not think that all who are wealthy and healthy and all in a monetary manner, they are happier. No, not at all. That is a misunderstanding, a misconception, an illusion that those who are wealthy and higher up in position are happier and better. They may have material greatness and materially they may be better. But look at the psychology. Are they really happy? And then the most important, are they ever thinking of the psychic being or the soul or spiritual growth? Hardly ever. Only when their wealth is damaged or disturbed or something gets lost or something gets broken, then they run to a temple and say, oh Lord, I've lost so much money, I've lost so much this thing, why? But when they were wealthy and all that, they never thought of the divine. So the question is that the soul can choose any of the so-called opposites, wealth or poverty, happiness or anguish. And in fact, the soul may reject affluence and accept poverty. Because sometimes in some other place it is written that the soul can choose poverty only to experience the non-pleasure of physical existence. You see, a lot of us people, we enjoy the pleasures and the happiness and the richness. So maybe on the physical level, it doesn't want to have these pleasures which it has maybe enjoyed in the previous lives, a lot of life of pleasure. But this time it says, no, I don't want any more this physical pleasure. So it may be taking the birth of a poor person. A man in poverty does not have the luxury of all these experiences of pleasure. So he says all this is done purposely. So we have to enlarge our vision of understanding this question of rebirth and karma. We are not here only for the material benefit. That has been the most, I won't use any strong word, but a very common, mundane and a low level of understanding. So that's the first thing that Sri Aurobindo brings us, that the truth of karma is that. Next, there's another misconception which has to be removed. It is sometimes popularly believed that the soul does not undergo any change as it passes through repeated births. In a sense, it is the repetition of the same person with a change of body environment only. You see, this is another beautiful thing. When we think that I will come back, in this life I have been poor, next life I will come back as a rich man. What do you mean? I will come back? Or that X person, he's a garib fellow, he's a poor fellow, next life he will come back as a rich person. What do we understand? Next life, is he going to be the same person? Aurobindo himself is the name of a person known as Rabindra in this life was exactly the same Rabindra in the past life. He is given an example of a person. So an X in this life will not be the same X in the future life and the next life. That is a misunderstanding when we say, when he comes back in the next life, he will be rich, he will be prosperous. Who is that he? That X person who has left his body in the present life has nothing to do with the future body or the future comforts. So how can we say that I will have that X person will be more prosperous? And if we say no, it's the soul which is going will come back with a greater prosperity, but how do you know? How do we know that this poor person in this life or this rich person in this life will have another greater richness? Because we think of rich and richer and richer. But how can we talk about the soul deciding, or how can you decide for the soul? Because as just now we saw, the soul can take up anything, poverty or wealth or anguish or happiness. So our fundamental misunderstanding is that we think it is the same person who comes back with a changed body. That is why we are so much in falsehood and ignorance to think that in my next life I'll come back, that this X person will come back with greater wealth. And now there is a fundamental question here. That is to say, we have talked so much about the person coming back. X person leaves his body, and then we say the karma comes back. Now that's the question that we should ask ourselves. Where is that karma that I have done in this life? Where is it packaged? My body? No, it gets burnt, it gets cremated. The vital? It is not a carrier of my karma. All that I have done, good and bad and nonsense and all that. The vital, as we have seen, it goes to that level, it gets dispersed, it dismantled, and it's over. So the vital is not the carrier. The vital being, our emotional being, is not the carrier. Then there is the question of the mind. We have so many memories, we have done great things, we have done, help the poor, done this, build this temple, build that thing. But you have done some good karma, as it is said. But good or bad, both the karmas, who is the carrier once the body is left? This is something which is very intriguing. You will not find this answer. Of course, people have answered saying, no, it's the soul which brings. But we have said soul does not carry any of your baggage of that life. We have seen it carries only those divine moments. The psychic being carries only what we explained as the psychic memory, where we think of the divine, where there is a divine spark that comes through, where there is a divine element that comes through your actions, you're reading poetry, you're dancing, you're seeing and looking at the sunlight. Wherever there is a question of a kind of an elation, where there's a kind of you feel quiet, you feel beautiful, you feel elation, that's the psychic memory. Those alone are taken up. Not all the great things you have done, all the business that you have done, all the money you have earned, all the help that you have given, all the insurances that you have done, nothing. So then how do we say that the karma comes back? That this time I have done a bad karma, so that karma comes back and next time I will have a good karma. And the good karma is nothing but more wealth. I mean, that's a nonsensical understanding. That is a primary question. Where is this baggage kept? Who is the person? Which part of our being carries that baggage? Is a question. I leave it to you, because you have to think over that. Because this is one of the most difficult questions I've seen. I myself was questioning and really searched a lot in Mother and Aurobindo. Of course, I found my answer. But I'd like you to think it over, because Spoon feeding is not good. You have also, now that you are, this is the 7th talk, you have been quite good philosophers by now. I think I have rubbed philosophy into your minds a bit. So think it over, because a very, very interesting question. Because unless and until we solve this question of who is the carrier, at least in our philosophy, in other philosophies they may say anything. We have seen the physical gone, the vital gone, the mental gone, and the psychic goes to its level. Then where is this baggage called karma hanging? So I'll leave it at that. Now where is this? Next the question is the question I said is, can we change? Can karma be changed? Can we make, as we said, we are the makers of our own karma, it is said. So this is I'm coming to the second point as the karma as the fate, as fate. Now this is interesting again, that karma as fate, what does it mean? We have said it's destiny. We can't change our karma. In India, you all your film talk and family talks, everywhere is a very pet sentence. How can we change our karma? This is my karma that I got married into this life, into this family. This is my karma. All the question of my karma, my karma, my karma. But can we change it at all? Well, I've been listening to some TV shows and all that. There's a lot of talk going on, but Sri Aurobindo is miles away from all this, the TV speakers. That's why, you may listen to it, but now that you are getting a glimpse of a new philosophy, a new vision of life, you must try to grasp this. Don't go back into all this, escape from rebirth and, salvation of all that is things of the past. As we said, Sri Aurobindo is never for this salvation and all this question. Now there is this, how do we change karma? Or can it be changed at all? Now here we have again a short, brilliant answer from Sri Aurobindo. He says, we are subject to a series of superimposed determinism. Now this is the answer. Karma, there is a superimposed determinisms, physical, vital, mental, higher, and the determinism of each plane can change or cancel the determinism of the other plane immediately below it. So this is where we have to understand. That is, we have to see this karma is a determinism, is a fate, is fate. But it belongs only to the physical level. There are karmas on different levels. Physical, emotional or vital, the mental, and the higher planes of spiritual and beyond. And as we go up the ladder, the determinism becomes looser and looser, and we become more and more free. And when we go to the higher levels, there is the complete freedom. So what does it mean? That from the Supreme Divine, as we come down to the level of matter, karma becomes more restricted, more dense, more rigid. So what we are speaking of karma is actually the rigid laws on the physical level. So you see, we have this Newton's theory. What is it? Is action equal to reaction or something? That is, there on the physical level, if I move a thing, if I push a thing, the reaction is equal, because on the physical level there is no compromise. If you put 10 pounds of energy into that, you get back 10 pounds. So there is an action versus reaction. There is all the time this question of, there is cause and effect. So when we see this cause and effect, we cannot challenge it. We say, yes, this has happened because you have done that. We cannot discount that. So anything that has happened, we say, oh, the cause is there. So this is kind of a cause and effect relation. So this physical thing, physical karma, is nothing but cause and effect. That is why you cannot refute it. It is as rigid as matter itself. There is a higher karma, or what we say, higher determinism. The vital, the emotional, where this question of cause and effect is not that rigid. It becomes much more fluid. You see, it is true that you may be thinking of wrong of somebody, but you don't get an immediate reaction from that somebody. Of course, if you are face to face and if you are given an open abuse, you may get a reaction. But it's on the level of the emotions. If you are quietly, silently jealous about somebody, or dirty feelings about somebody, you may not get it immediately. But after some time, these same feelings will be reciprocated in a different manner from the same person or from other person. But you have to be ready that once you have put out a wrong emotion, that emotion will come back to you in some form or the other. But it is not as instantaneous and as rigid as a physical level. There is a karma on the mental level. If you put out a wrong idea or a good idea, whatever, good or bad ideas. So sometimes these good or bad ideas, they take long time. They come back to you. They return to you, they come back. But there is again the question of space, sometimes there is a question of time, there is a greater flexibility. And also this question of the intensity of the reaction may not be same as it was on the physical level. Physical level, if you give a blow to somebody, you will receive a blow as hard. But on the mental level, already there is greater freedom. On the spiritual level, once you start meditating, contemplating on a divine being, these higher emotions, this contemplation and meditation, they will return again to you with a greater vibration of a divinity, divine consciousness. So the law of determinism continues to be. But as we ascend the scale, everything becomes more and more fluid, flexible, and the sense of freedom increases. So if you want to change your karma, you can do so. There's a condition. The condition is, as long as you're working on the same physical level, you cannot change. That means if you do a thing wrong, you have to face the consequences. It may be now or tomorrow. But there is no question of consequence going to the next life. Sometimes it is there. But we have to face more or less all these physical things happening on this level. But then if you want to change the consequences, change the karma on the physical level or any level, the only way is to scale the level. If you go on the emotional level, or on the mental level, or better on the spiritual level, you can then change your karma on the physical level itself. That is the beauty. It's not that the karma is kind of irrefutable. It can be changed, but on condition that we change our level of consciousness, as it is said, or the scale of consciousness, we can move out and change it. So that way we see that the karma is not the ultimate, the last word. There is something beyond it. And what happened Mother explains beautifully that this idea of a rigidity of karma was given to humanity. She says at a given moment in evolution, to present to people from being in a completely unconscious egoism, in a total unconsciousness of the consequences of what they do. You see, in evolution, now we can understand everything has its own purpose. When this philosophy of karma came in very strong, and most of these Indians till last 2000 years or 5000 years or 500 years, we are hooked to this. It was a time, when people said, when Pope said, the father said, the priest said, or Acharya said, or your family people said, you must not do that, then if you do that, your actions will be counted and you'll be suffering a lot. And then we go forward to say, oh, if you do that, you'll go to sin, you'll go to hell. So we have invented all kinds of, this terror threats, so that we stop all these nonsensical activities of ego. So Mother explained this was a moment in the evolution of human beings when we were not so conscious, when we were not really, very subtle in our thinking. Even now that it's not that we are now very subtle and more conscious. But Mother and Sriaurobindo have been constantly telling us to be aware, to be more conscious, because it will affect all these things. So to be more conscious, we have been given this lesson of sin and hell and heaven, etc. But now it's not required. Not for everybody, if those who want to aspire, they can go to the higher level. So it will teach us to be non-egoistic. So again, you see the beautiful point of going beyond ego is this question of rising in our consciousness. We have both the benefits. We go beyond ego and we go beyond the karma. And then, of course, ultimately, Mother and Sriaurobindo explain that in this universe, there are three main powers. The cosmic law, what we say karma. The cosmic law of karma. Second, is the divine compassion. First karma, then karuna, the divine compassion. Acting on as many as it can reach through the nets of the law and giving them their chance. Higher than that is the divine grace, which acts more incalculably but also more irresistibly than the others. So this world is ruled by three forces: karma, karuna and kripa, the divine grace. So we have to understand this in this larger context. Let us not be so dogmatic and lose ourselves. Oh, this is my karma, I am forever done. No. There is, again, this is the spiritual turn that we have to take, that we have to think of the kripa. And then there is, beyond that, the grace. And now this karuna and kripa, you see what Sriaurobindo is telling us? The Mother reiterates in a different way. The compassion seeks to relieve the suffering of all, whether they deserve it or not. When we say the divine compassion, it relieves the suffering of all, whether they deserve it or not. So it's not the question, some people have asked me, do I deserve divine compassion? The meaning of divine compassion is just this. You may deserve it or not. The divine compassion does not really question you and measure you and what are the good things you have done, what are the bad things. It's not that calculating spirit. It's only the karma which is a kind of a, as we said, arithmetician who has a logbook. It's on the physical level. It is kind of very strict. But when it goes to the question of compassion, There is no such measuring. And then, of course, the grace does not recognize the right of suffering to exist and abolish it. The grace, actually behind grace there is fundamentally the divine love. So it's divine love or divine grace does not recognize the right of suffering to exist. You see, in compassion there was suffering, but there was a kind of a relief that is brought to all. But there is suffering, but there is relief brought to all. But grace does not bring in suffering at all. It doesn't accept suffering. It recognizes the right of suffering to exist. So this is the highest. When you get the divine grace, there is no question of suffering existing at all. So we have to see that we can move towards that divine grace. And on a very practical level, what the mother explains to get the divine grace, she says, when one does not repeat one's past mistakes, the divine power, the power of the divine grace, abolishes their consequences. You see, a very simple pragmatic truth. Their karma in the being. But as long as mistakes are repeated, nothing can be abolished. Because one recreates them at every minute. When a person has made a serious error, say a serious mistake, it can be serious or not, but we are not concerned primarily with the serious ones. Such mistakes have their consequences in life, a karma which has to be exhausted. The divine grace, if you call upon it, has the power to abolish that karma, to cut short the consequences. But the grace can only do this when you, within yourself, don't begin all over again. When the mistake committed is not renewed, the past can be completely purified and abolished on condition that one does not keep making it in a perpetual present. The past can be cleansed to the point where it has no effect of any kind on the future, but only on condition that you stop the wrong vibration in yourself, that you don't reproduce the same vibration indefinitely. So you see, we have been given a very beautiful understanding of karma, these three levels of karma, compassion and grace. They can act. And now what is it required? There's got to be a prayer. She also speaks about the aspiration. An intense prayer, a constant aspiration to move spiritually, to grow spiritually. Because this grace, as we said, and even compassion, they are more worried about your growth. So you do not ask grace and the divine compassion to say material things. Don't ask for material things saying, I want this, I want this house, I want this car, I want these things. Imagine the greatness, the heights of this consciousness of grace. So what grace and compassion are looking forward to is the growth of your levels of consciousness. Your material wishes, there are other smaller gods and goddesses who can fulfill. Because not all gods and goddesses can really abolish your suffering. It's only the supreme divine grace which can do that. So that is why Mother says, you can do it. You can invoke the grace. But the only thing is, once you realize a mistake, not a mistake of making a mistake on a computer and there is, sorry, I've made a blunder. It's not that. It's not the external physical mistake. Mistakes of your consciousness. When you say, I have thought ill of somebody, I have done harm to somebody, emotionally I have injured somebody, mentally I have injured somebody. So when you are making these confessions inwardly, but don't repeat it again and again, as Master's mother says, don't make it into a perpetual present, then you have all the chances of really invoking the divine grace. So you'll see a life change that gradually opens up. So we do not need to be bothered by this question of karma, which has bogged us down, and all the time we think of this negative way of karma and punishment and reward. At least coming to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and of course as Lord Krishna has given. You see, I've taken out really seed thoughts from Bhagavad Gita. You see, when he has given us this question of the Lord, coming down and pervading the whole thing, I wanted to get into the deeper meaning. And there we see Sri Aurobindo telling us how do we go to the deeper meaning. Well, all is done. There's one last sentence I may say. You see, karma on the practical level is basically sprouts from ego. All karmic action is a child of our ego. The source is our ego. How do we go out of this source of ego and yet do our actions? Well, we have been speaking about detachment, desirelessness and all that, yes. But can there be a very simple key to that whole thing? I would say just split the word karma into two. What do you get? You get kar and ma. That is the secret. That is the key. You ask the mother to do. You say ma, kar, ma. All this action tu kar. Not me, not my ego. I don't want my ego to be involved. Because that is the ultimate secret that the Gita has told us. That behind your nature there is the divine Shakti, there is the divine Purusha. So why don't we apply that in the practical sense? And so karma becomes kar and ma becomes your spiritual japa. After all times if you say ma tu kar. And this is not a mantra that I am giving you, that of course I have discovered this formula. But this is based on what the mother herself has said. That she says, let me do the action for you. I mean, how beautifully she has told a sadhak of the ashram. That why are you trying to do any action? I mean, even from the moment of taking a breakfast, going to the office, taking decisions, right, signing your checks and says, let me do. That's what is the meaning of karma. She says, let the mother do, let her do. If this is there in your constant consciousness, what more do you want? Every little act, every little thought, every little feeling, it's a ma tu hi kar. Main kaun hu karne wala? I'm nobody. I'm just this body instrument. But you are the doer. If we can make that our daily prayer and of our pilgrimage, then nothing of karma binds us. You don't have to think of your future births. Let her take over and let the grace take over. So all this philosophy, sarva dharman parityajya, mamekam sharanam vraja. One little sentence. I mean, that's the most beautiful phrase, and that is in an action line. You say kar ma tu kar. And let us pray that she took over. Thank you so much.